Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello there, welcome back.
I hope everybody is doing well today. So this we see out of RT. Global wheat war is coming. The West could be forced to ask Russia for grain in exchange for lifting sanctions. Now this is from RT, so this is from a Russian news source. Obviously it's going to have a certain slant. But it's interesting to note that, again, people are finding it almost impossible to really sort out what's really going on out there. Remember, we had number 46 saying the ruble is rubbish, and yet now we see the ruble hits a 5-year high as gas buyers bend to Putin's will. And then yesterday we had this come out. This is from Jennifer Zhang. First-hand info, unique insights about China and the CCP, and she has a backup account. And it says, exclusive, explosive, please do read and share. I've done the whole thing, full transcript of the entire 56 minutes of top secret recording of the war mobilization meeting of the CCP PLA's Southern War Zone in Guangdong Province. Yes, and it's hashtag Taiwan, hashtag Japan, hashtag US in danger.
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that I think we should definitely pay attention to, amongst other things. So we're kind of looking at something that might be coming down the pipes soon.
And, back in 2005, I've quoted this a million times. There was a Chinese defense minister that gave a speech that, if you just read this whole thing, and that's not long, this is unfortunately the abbreviated version. The larger version I do have linked in some videos, if it's still available. It covers everything we're seeing today. Everything. Back in 2005. Everything we're seeing today, step by step. So I read this whole transcript, and we do have it farther on down yesterday, and started to put together a video yesterday, and this is that video now. And now other people have read it too, and so they're putting out videos talking about this. This is exactly what I've always seen going back to 1984, and we have been sharing this. It reads just like that 2005 transcript, pretty much. It gives you more details in some areas and less details in others. You have to realize, too, that whole transcript is just about the southern Guangdong province. So it's massive what they're talking about. The undertaking they're talking about is massive. So it's something to be very aware of. Now, we've asked the guides, and the guides don't dismiss this, but at the same time, they make it seem like it's not the number one thing at the moment. There's other things that we should be a little bit more concerned with at this moment, but it is something that is apparently in the works and being planned. And we have talked about that before, and many, many others have had these visions and seen basically the United States invaded. And, we've talked about this. Of course, there's always those out there that will quote Bible prophecy, which gives you names like Gomer and Gog and Magog and Rosh and Tubal. And people will be like, what's that? And you got to go and you have to look and see, where those tribes were and what they represent today. And, of course, so many people are waiting for Ezekiel 38. And, I was all over this as an 11-year-old, so, I mean, this is all ingrained in my mind. But when you do look at some other prophecies that give you extraordinary detail, there's many prophecies by Nostradamus that are pointing towards a third world war. Obviously, we've covered so many times the Hopi prophecies, which say that the United States is going to be bombed by the first ones that brought in the ancient wisdom, which would include China. And the only place that was going to be safe, according to the Hopi, was Hopi Land, the Four Corners area. And that was going to, basically hearken the end of this particular age. And then, of course, we have Washington's vision, which talks about the U.S. being invaded as well. And that's actually still something people could go visit in the Library of Congress, even though it's thought to be a work of quote unquote fiction. It supposedly is something that was written down maybe 60, 70 years after the fact of Washington. But again, well, what's our oldest book of the Bible that we have that's complete? Well, it's 300 to 400 AD, 300 to 400 years after the fact. And this is just one single book. I'm talking the Gospel of John, not the entirety of the Bible itself. So again, we have many, many other sources talking about in big detail the fact of WW3, which we could see is being worked right now. And of course, some people don't believe in Albert Pike's 1871 saying to his friend Mazzini, who actually is the one that got him into the Masonic Lodge, that there was 3 world wars that were planned in 1871. And there's documentation of this back around 1900 before the First World War happened. So, again, that's kind of curious as well. And we have here, China buzzes Taiwan with fighter jets and bombers. Okay, that's nothing new. And the United States bases in Japan. Okay, that sounds like it might be a little bit of a tick up as number 46 travels to South Korea.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, little by little, we're seeing this escalate and just sort of kind of waiting to see, well, what's going to be that straw that breaks the camel's back here?
Absolutely. Over here we see the U.S. media already entertaining possibility of war with China. As we see from Foreign Affairs, Russia's aggression has raised the specter of nuclear war, but if China attempted to invade Taiwan and the U.S. came to Taipei's aid, the threat of escalation could outstrip the current crisis in Europe. Oh, absolutely. This would be huge. Absolutely huge, obviously. But, I've always felt that Ukraine is just, it's like a feint to the head. You faint, but you're really going to go and attack the body. And as Biden visits Asia, China launches South China Sea drills. They're holding military exercises in the disputed South China Sea, coinciding with his visit to South Korea and Japan. Let's hope he doesn't get lost.
You get lost in the streets.
Yeah, my name is Joe. I think. Yeah. Which way is Tokyo? Anyway, satellite images show China staging mock attacks on U.S. Navy ships. And they were doing this, out in the desert. And this person down below says, I served for 20 years. We always staged exercises on Soviet force mock-ups. This is not new. We all do it. Okay, but we're just putting things together here. Meanwhile, BRICS, which is an economic group that we've covered since the beginning of the channel, talking about how it's being built up as something that would eventually be an alternative to the petrodollar and the current world order that could bring about a new world order. So BRICS members back China's call for expansion. Well, yeah, because NATO's expanding, so now they're looking to expand. This is all about, okay, we're going to split the world in two. Some nations might remain neutral. I'm hoping India maintains their neutrality. They are buying a lot of stuff of various sorts. They buy military hardware from Russia. They have worked with Russia closely. They don't work so closely with China typically, but they do work closely with Russia. But they might maintain neutrality because, again, they've also had military exercises with Australia, US, and UK. So, China and India, obviously we had that border dispute too, and then India and Pakistan don't get along so well. Pakistan and China are celebrating their 70th or 71st anniversary of basically their alliance, so to speak. So Pakistan and China, very strong. And so this is really, there are some key nations, Turkey is all over the place and is one to watch. India as well. Those are two real key countries to watch what they're doing to see how this is going to wind out. But they will be interesting to see who is going to be the new members. Will it be Indonesia? Indonesia is a really large country, and many people don't understand how large it is in more ways than one. It's a grouping of hundreds, if not thousands, of islands. And it has a huge population. Algeria as well. We'll have to watch and see how that plays out. Meanwhile, this little tweet here, it goes even back to the Clintons, really. Obama let China build fake islands and believe Xi's promises not to militarize them. Oops, now Biden's going to let China island hop east and take over the Pacific. As you see the previous quote that he's quoting, U.S. and allies concerned that Kiribati, a Pacific island nation 3,000 kilometers from Hawaii, is negotiating a security deal with China. Comes on the heels of a Chinese deal with the Solomon Islands, which has been a big issue in the Australian election. By the way, Australia has a new prime minister. We'll see what changes, or if anything changes. And before we get going any further, just want to ask everybody, do subscribe to both channels and have the little bell clicked. I've seen a bunch of comments where people are just checking in every day because they know we're going to put a video out on one or both every day, because they're not getting notified. And this is because they don't want all this coming out. Again, there's a reason why. It kind of put a crimp in their plans.
Yeah, I mean, that's just something that we seem to do pretty good.
Well, it's because it's imprinted in us. It's our purpose for being here. And here, this is a video that I published January 17th, 2018. And this is fascinating what they do too, because I know, the views were way higher than this. And the thumbs up 61, they roll everything after time backwards. It's just a weird thing. I've even noticed it on music channels and channels that you wouldn't think would be anything, that they would find threatening. Visions of the future, alien invasion, U.S. invaded by China and Russia. And here I'm just sharing what I've seen going back to 1984. And one of the things I did see was helicopters over the U.S. in certain areas, and troops coming and repelling out. I saw basically, I think they came from Cuba. They might have also come from other spots in Latin America, but they came into Florida. And in the visions, I was like in Florida. And that truthfully is one of the reasons why I left Florida when I did, because I didn't want that timeline to come through. And so one of my thoughts was, okay, whenever I've seen this, I'm in Florida, or I know there's one part of my dream / vision where I hear people talking about, okay, they're 20 miles behind some of the civilians that are vacating the area in southwestern part of Florida. And again, timelines change all the time. But I just wanted to share with you guys, this is over 4 years ago. This is like 4 years and 4 months ago. Just sharing all this, sharing people fleeing. Now, the migration was in the U.S., and it was basically fleeing from war zone areas along the coasts as they had come in from the Pacific Northwest through Canada and other spots as well over the border. And there were tons of them that were already here. So this one was October 8th, 2018. Again, talking about Red October, Red Dawn, and martial law rumors. This one was when we weren't getting censored so much. 40,000 views it shows, 856 thumbs up. And then this one's got 19,000 views, and it shows, I was talking about this other, this is not my map. This was some other lady, and then I touched me on the stuff that I had seen. But this other lady who was a psychic showed that China and Russia were going to come and occupy the U.S. 2022 to 2024. Again, 2022, February 22nd, 2022 is the Pluto return. That happened. And that was the time when Russia decided to go into the Ukraine. The Pluto return is when the U.S. was basically had their signing of the Declaration of Independence. That's where Pluto was in relation to the sky and us. And it came around to the exact point again for the very first time, February 22nd, 2022. And that means that basically things get redone, remade, or end. And so, this is obviously from an astrological standpoint, it's the U.S. being remade. And why did they start the war in the Ukraine? Because it's not really about the Ukraine. Just as Taiwan won't really be about Taiwan. It's about where is the new world order going to be centered out.
Right. It's something that is, the picture is kind of painting itself and giving us more information day after day. So I think this is the time where we just sort of sit and pay attention to what's going on, which is things are significant right now. Things are definitely changing fast.
Absolutely, and you can see this lady made this prediction. I forget if it was around 2000 or in the 90s, but she thought 2016, 2017 that the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico were going to meet up. The Mississippi River was going to be super wide and basically cut the nation in two, just like Casey said, and that obviously hasn't happened yet. So again, timelines can shift. There's always the possibility of things shifting. I know a lot of people have a more fundamentalist mindset. They're going to think everything is set in stone. This is what the Creator wants. But from our viewpoint, no, it's not set in stone. And the Creator's within all of us, and we all have a say in what becomes the reality. So again, knowing what's planned is very powerful, because then we could kind of call them out on it, and we could try to get people to not participate in it. And this one we did on April 12th, 2020, again, is a real red dawn in the works, the planned blood sacrifice of the USA and NATO. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. This is exactly what we're seeing. It is. War is a blood sacrifice to dark, evil entities. And you might say, well, in ancient times, those pagan people were horrible. They used to sacrifice people. Well, people are being sacrificed right now on the battlefield all over the whole globe.
Right. And, the politicians and the leaders, they're the ones that are in charge of this, to the point where they give people uniforms. They dress people up, and then they send them to a place where they know what's going to happen to them. I mean, if that's not sinister, I don't know what is.
And this one we entitled it Plain and Simply. Plain and simple. They are weakening the West to allow for a Red Dawn scenario, which is coming shortly. That was June 13th, 2020. How can you state it any clearer? This is all about destroying the West, getting us weak enough so that they could do their invasion. So as you can see, we've been preaching this to the choir the entire time evolutionary has been out there. And here we see people are catching on en masse. China is preparing for war. First, Xi orders Chinese banks to risk assess and insulate against potential U.S. sanctions. Now he's directing Chinese nationals overseas to divest of any assets. China has been hoarding grains for over a year. Oh, by the way, I mean, some of the grains, they have like 60% or more of the entire globe's supply. China is set to win a long-term war. And is it because of his leadership? No. It's because the real power structure has chosen this. It's not China. It's not the average Chinese person. It's not the average Russian person. This is the thing. The citizens of the world don't really have a say. We're just being manipulated and maneuvered while they're doing all their planned chaos.
Right. Well, they give us the illusion that we might have something to say with who is calling the shots.
Do you know, I read today, because Australia had the election, right? In Australia, you have to vote. You have to vote. If you don't vote, you're going to get fined. And it could eventually end up taking you to court if you don't vote. And the way I look at it is, if you vote in a system that you know is flawed, compromised, and not what it appears to be, you're kind of saying, I acquiesce, I give my support to the system. Well, they force you to over there. Oh, wow. And now, some Australians might tell us how they've avoided. Please do share what your experience is. This is what I was just reading today when I was seeing about the change of government. This article from the Wall Street Journal goes in a little bit deeper, as it's talking about what we were just talking about. They're getting ready. I mean, they're in the final stages. Now, the guides don't say this is happening tomorrow or next week or, even this summer, but it things could always change. Honestly, they're more focused, and they've always had us more focused on getting prepared to be self-sufficient. Because, again, with this monkeypox that's out there, is this the big one? We don't get that's the big one. We do get that it is another layer. It is not something to just, dismiss and say, oh, there's nothing there. No, there's layer upon layer upon layer going on. So it is another layer. There will be new laws. There will be perhaps all new, unfortunately, lockdowns going on, restrictions, etc., etc., etc. And there's more stuff that we're always being exposed to every single day. These things are layering on. There's this effect. A long time ago, in my early 20s, I was like absorbed in working out and getting as strong as possible, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I ate massive amounts of food, and I gave myself a lot of food allergies because of this. And I went to the allergist, and he basically said, well, allergies are like taking a pot, filling it halfway with water. And then you add this to it. Okay, that didn't make the pot spill over, but you add something else, pretty soon the pot's spilling over. This is exactly what's going on with exposure to different things. We're exposed to this one thing, it's raising that threshold. We're exposed to something else, it's getting higher. Then finally we're exposed to another thing, and it boils over. What does that boiling over look like? Well, it looks like lack of energy, lack of focus, foggy mind, allergies, inflammation, all sorts of ailments, aches and pains, eventually cancers, succumbing to one thing or another. It's this pot that they keep adding things to. And the monkeypox is something that should not be overlooked. Most definitely it shouldn't be overlooked. Is it the big thing? Well, the big thing we have seen, the guides have been saying since the first outbreak happened back in the end of 2019, January 2020, that there's something coming, that when it comes, you just stay inside and you avoid all contact. And again, this is why the guides are telling us, have enough food. How much is enough? To me, I think we need to get through 2025. And so I'm looking at least 2 to 3 years. And with the idea that you can be self-sufficient, if you're blessed without restrictions on gathering rainwater, and you could have chickens in your backyard, or you could grow food on your front yard, you might have to just simply put a fence out there with some padlocks, or just simply understand that you're going to be feeding the neighborhood too. Up to you, and go with your heart on that. But again, you're going to have to basically, if you want to maintain your freedom and your self-sufficiency, it's all about self-sufficiency. It's all about growing what you can grow at home and having enough to get you through this time, which it really feels like we are in the deepest part. We're starting to get into the very deepest part of this tribulation period, for lack of a better word.
Right. I mean, it's very clear that they have their own alchemy of destruction. And when we are given this information, we need to respond appropriately. And that's to make our own alchemy of survival and not be in need of certain things, so that we don't have to bend to particular rules that are going to be laid out for us so that we can eat. We need to supply for ourselves.
Exactly. So here you see China building long-range cruise missiles launched from ship containers. Disguised weapons turned freighters into warships. Ports to missile bases. This is what's been ongoing. And when we think about how things are in this world, you see that these are the largest navies in the world. China has 777 ships. Russia 605. That's 1,382 ships to 484 for the U.S. Now, of course, they're not all necessarily the same quality, but the reality is a lot of China's ships are newer, and a lot of the U.S.'s ships are older, and a lot of them are being mothballed, and we've talked about that as well. So it's something to realize. It's a 3-to-1 advantage when you put these two together against the U.S. And then you have their fishing fleet, which are a bunch of junks. Yes, they're junks. And they can move thousands of these fishing boats at will. Now, look to Dunkirk. If you don't think that little boats can do anything, look to Dunkirk. And some of you are probably saying, what's Dunkirk? Well, Dunkirk was World War II episode where the Nazi Germany basically overran France, and almost all of the UK's military was sitting on a beach waiting to be evacuated, and they couldn't get ships in. They couldn't get big military ships in to evacuate people because they were just sitting ducks. So they were set to lose their entire navy, pretty much. So much of their military was just at risk. And of course, there were French forces there and others as well, American forces and Canadian. And so what ended up saving the day, it was a bunch of private boats, just little private boats ferrying people back to the UK.
I know. And it's like people taking responsibility for other people and going out on a limb and trying to make a difference. And for each person that decided to make that difference, well, a life was saved. And can you imagine whole lineages were spared because of one person's decision to help others?
Exactly, so in these times of war, which we are heading into, they are still obviously in the power structure, and they are intent on this. So it's going to be how do we behave and react during this time period? How well prepared are we as individuals? Have we already talked to other people on our street, in our neighborhoods, family members? Maybe, maybe you have family that's sitting on a 100-acre farm somewhere, and you're getting this bad feeling about sitting in the middle of LA or New York or Chicago. Listen to your guts, listen to your instincts. Yeah, it might be time to shift gears because we are getting much, much closer. And think about all those ships that have been just sitting there off the coast of Taiwan, right? Off the coast of southern China. There's Guangdong. This is Guangdong right here. This area. And of course, our friend David at Adapt 2030, he knows much more about living here and life here because he's explored it. He's a world traveler, and he spent a long time. When I first was talking to him, he was in Taiwan. And I think we first touched base like 4.5 years ago. And all these are ships. Now, they've been basically sitting for so long we're told because of the plague on the land, of which, there really wasn't any plague on the land en masse. Killing people at that time. So what were they really doing? Were they being outfitted with these, missiles? And how long does it take to get across the ocean? You might see a whole bunch of these backlogged in a month or two off the California coast again. And if they were heading more towards the East Coast, it might be a little bit more. Again, this was an opportunity to outfit and disguise what's really, really going on. So this is from Jennifer Zhang, and this is what she obviously speaks Chinese, so this was spoken in Chinese. She transcribed this whole thing, and this was just about an hour worth of meeting that they say was snuck out. And I read all this yesterday. As you see, war mobilization meeting of the Southern War Zone of the PLA, Guangdong Province in a state of war. So this is an English translation of a leaked secret audio file of war mobilization meeting of the Standing Committee of the Provincial Communist Party Committee of China on May 14th, 2022. So this is fresh. And again, is this real? Again, everybody's got to weigh it with their own instincts. But when you look at everything else that's going on and go back to that 2005 statement, just look at everything else that's going on, and then how does it feel? It feels like even if it's not true, it still is pretty much on. This is what's in the plans. And so when they're talking here, they're talking about their major task is this right here first. the construction of a national defense mobilization command system, and second, the implementation of wartime work mechanism. Third, wartime control preparation. And then, they go over and discuss this. So it's all about transitioning to a global war system that looks to be in place for a long period of time. This is not about, okay, we could take Taiwan in a week at most, maybe 2. And then, we're going to bank that NATO and the U.S. is not going to do anything. No, this is like getting ready to switch over all the industry to a wartime industry. And they mention big companies that we all know, like Huawei, and it just goes on down the line. All the tech that's going to be needed. It's all about switching over civilian fleets to a wartime fleet and utilizing. See, this is the difference too. Even in World War II, what did they do in the United Kingdom when they needed to? They took people's personal boats. They took your pleasure craft. They confiscated it. They could do that in the U.S. During a national emergency as well. They could take my house. They could take your house. They could take your car. They could take my car. They could take my truck. They could take your truck. They could take your boat. If you are a pilot, they could take your airplane. They could take anything you own. Not only that, but they could put you in a workforce. Yeah. This is what's in the legislation. They could put you in a workforce and say, you know what you're going to do? You're going to dig ditches. We need you to dig trenches, here along the beach in Anaheim. Just saying, it could be anything. But they can organize workforces and put you to work in a wartime environment. And of course, rationing is going to be part of that. And there'll be a lot more, obviously, going into it. But what this is all talking about is a massive restructuring of the entire economy into a wartime economy. So I got lectures on this as a child from my mother, who was, her own little historian. And it made me go deeper, especially into what she had grown up, because she grew up in World War II. And she saw this firsthand. And her brother and her dad, lifetime Navy. My grandfather spent most of his life on a submarine, the USS Nautilus, most of the time as well, the very first nuclear submarine. And he was a diesel mechanic by trade and helped to actually build it. And so she would always talk about how every factory that was making cars would all of a sudden be making tanks, planes, other military pieces of hardware. This is exactly what they're talking about here. This is exactly switching from making chips for, electric vehicles or cars, trucks, to those chips being outfitted to go into, tanks and drones and planes and stuff. So this is all about restructuring the entire economy into a wartime footing.
And as I'm looking at this, the word that comes to me is dexterity, and they've managed their situation so that they can, bob and weave and do what needs to be done for a certain outcome. And then we need to look at what they're doing and mirror it. So we need to also use our dexterity to shift to situations that are going to be most advantageous for us. So they're actually giving us a lot of information on how we need to respond, well in advance.
Absolutely. They get into some numbers that are staggering, that, different ships that would be needed at different times in segments, personnel to, this is not Taiwan. This is not Taiwan. And again, if you go back to that 2005 statement by the defense minister, he said, Taiwan, that's nothing. Taiwan's like a bucket. We don't need a bucket. We need the whole reservoir. We need the U.S., we need Canada, we need Australia if we're going to feed our people in the coming times. And so this is talking about a massive mobilization that's going on on an incredibly large scale. And this is just that one province that they're focused on here. So other provinces, I'm sure, are being, readied as well. This is the province that's closest, right across from Taiwan. But the mobilization that they're talking about is enormous. And it's going to a long-term war footing where everything is going to be about war. It's going to be about getting all the civilians behind them. All the civilians working in unison. Everybody working in unison. If you have studied the Korean War, and at a certain point in the Korean War, until China got involved and started sending their troops in directly, the South was doing well and pushing up into the North. And then China just started to bring in wave after wave of troops because, again, they got 1.4 billion people. Again, 4 times the population, probably a little bit more than 4 times the population of the U.S. And there were so many coming in that it was overwhelming. And they pushed them all the way back to the current demilitarized zone. And it basically is a truce. It's never really ended. So I see today that Mike Adams has done this piece, and he's talking about this because he's listened to and read that transcript as well. As you see his headline, China preparing for D-Day invasion of the continental U.S. with forces to land on the beaches of California as 46 and GOV new over there serve as, Well, we know it's been a Trojan horse operation the entire time. And so, here he's got the link to Jennifer Zhang's work as well. And some of the highlights that he's touched on. Again, China's shutdowns of Shanghai and Beijing, these are just cover stories to allow the military to use seaport infrastructure to load cargo ships with military supplies in preparation for a large D-Day land invasion. D-Day was enormous, too. If you get a chance to go back and just look at the size and scope, this would dwarf that. This would dwarf that as well. And again, we're not just talking about China. You're talking about BRICS. And so that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But in reality, North Korea actually has a large military. If Indonesia's on board, that's 300 plus million people. That country is almost the size of the U.S. with population. Pakistan is strongly on board. So basically what we have, actually, they probably would have actually numerical superiority. And if India did side with them, they would have vast numerical superiority. Vast. The only way the West would be able to handle that would be using technology we haven't seen yet, or the N-word. That's the only way. So, although the U.S. is not specifically mentioned in leaked audio, preparations refer to the final war. Yeah, the final war before the NWO, because the NWO, the plan is to shift power, as we've been saying, east, and we've been saying that since 2017. And, we've known since 1984 again. The invasion forces would cross the Pacific disguised as merchant ships, cargo ships. Once they arrive within short range, rocket range, containers on top of these ocean vessels would open up and launch short range rockets, including tactical ends. Striking National Guard and military bases in California, Chinese troops would then land onto the beaches. They would siege the ports like Long Beach and use ports to land heavier ships which offload armor, artillery, and other heavy weapons of war. From there, China would have established a beachhead similar to the way the Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy in World War II. And again, 2/3 of the U.S. population lives within 100 miles of the coast. That's 2/3 of the population lives within 100 miles of the coast. Both China and Russia have pre-staged large caches of weapons, uniforms, RPGs, automatic weapons, night vision equipment, other military gear all across the U.S., county by county. These equipment caches will be activated when the CCP and Russian civilians are told to go hot. As we've talked about, millions crossing the border in just like a handful of years. Millions have crossed this border. Millions and millions and millions. There could be there could be multiple millions of military personnel already in place in the U.S.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have gotten that from the guides that they've already been here in some cases. Generations of them are here and have been programmed to react a certain way. So, I mean, the picture is just filling itself out. The painting is getting almost complete. So this is the time where we need to, check our stocks, check our things, make sure we're set to sustain for a little while, and just kind of hang on, because it looks like it's going to be a little crazy.
Absolutely. So, all those sleepers get turned on, and there's sleepers that are infiltrated in the government already, as many have guessed. And there are many places that are just going to welcome them in like conquering heroes, and just hand over keys to the city, keys to the state even. And there's others that'll fiercely resist. And so they know this will be something that takes time. But again, this would be below that 2005 speech. The Chinese defense minister said, we understand that if you beat the U.S., it's over. It's the U.S. that has to be beaten. NATO will fall apart. NATO will collapse. The rest of the European powers will just disintegrate. They won't be able to keep up any sort of real defense if the U.S. is taken out. And so again, it's just a layered thing that we've been talking about, and many people will point out, well, we have more guns than China's army does. Yes, but again, it's a layered thing. And the very first part of this whole program that he opened up this speech back in 2005, what did he say? The very first thing is going to involve BIO, logical. That's what we've seen. That's what's already happened. And we know all cures are not basically constructed the same way. If you can understand what we're saying, and I'm trying to be very plain without stepping over a line here, but you should be able to pick up what we're putting down. and just read, and check out a little bit deeper for yourself. So they are expecting massive riots and civil unrest in large cities as well. And so it's talking about how do they, again, control it. They got to basically bump up the narrative again. Hey, weapons of mass destruction. We have here Bush talking about the atrocities of Putin, and then did he really slip? Some people say no. What that was a kind of sticking up one finger, so to speak, and saying, see, well, yeah, I knew what I was doing. Iraq. Yeah, he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. And so, again, this is something that we've been preaching the entire time this channel has been here. From January 17th, 2018, first we're talking about this. And is it right now? It's coming. It's coming. Again, what would we do? Well, I've decided to show Cindy some wartime information of what it was like to be in a country that was being invaded in war. Like, what was it like to be in Poland in 1940, 1941, 42? How about France too? What was life like? I mean, it was tough. And, you guys, so many of us, those of us that are Starseed light workers that came here to basically bridge this time and try to get people to be out of the system, try to wake up to all the manipulation that's going on. We volunteered for the crazy roller coaster ride, or maybe you like the scrambler more. Yes, definitely it can be trying, but we're here with a purpose, and that's to wake people up and to get them through these times, because we will come out the other side. And that doesn't mean it's over yet. There's always the whip, and then there's the honey. There'll be still temptations after a period like the period that they're trying to manifest before us now. And if we could wake up enough soldiers around the world to just say, we had that opportunity too, as in so many areas where these dates for men, MAN dash hyphen dates, there were a lot of people that took the opportunity to leave the military, to leave certain positions. We have one family member that left being a policeman in a major city, and now he's just working with Mother Earth. And that's fine, because that's going to bring him peace. And with many people, we know doctors that are not in the medical profession anymore because they just can't anymore. So what are they doing? They're doing construction. They're building. They're out there in the sun and working with their hands again. We're going to all get dirty in these times. We're going to have to work with our hands. We're going to have to be able to support ourselves. We're going to have to be able to pick each other up.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you just look at that information about Australia making it illegal that you not vote, this tells me that in our history, at some point, we have gathered as a people and done that because there's some intimidation and fear that we might be awakening that piece of our DNA, that wishes to not conform but wants to work with people, others who are like-minded. So that we definitely have going for us, and we just need to step back and understand what's happening and really know what to prepare for, and just put on our best self. Suit up and show up and do your best.
Absolutely. And if I had to put a timeline, I do think it'll be underway, I would say, by 2025 for sure. I do feel that's a safe bet. I do feel, again, that they've telegraphed everything. Is it possible that this could happen this year? Again, we've felt strongly that we are going to be in the thick of things by September of this year. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, because we really haven't gotten clearly from the guides that we will be in that WW hashtag number 3 with a Red Dawn scenario on the beaches here by September. But yeah, it could be rolling out in stages. But then again, if you look to what has been put out there, they understand that Taiwan is just a drop in the bucket, and they want the whole bucket. So you might as well be as prepared as you can be for anything, be as self-sufficient as you can be for any case. And again, if you have friends and family in places that might feel safer, maybe they're sitting in a nice farm in Indiana or in Kentucky or in Tennessee or something like that, in the mountains of West Virginia, and you're sitting there in DC or New York or LA. Maybe make a visit. See how it feels, Again, it's good to be prepared. No fear, and again, we'll have people that say this is fear-mongering, but this is exactly what we've always seen and always known is going to happen in these times. And, there's been people that say, well, you're nothing but doom and gloom. But yeah, it's not necessarily doom and gloom. Did World War II happen? Yeah, it actually happened. It did happen despite, people trying to avert it. And again, if we could wake up enough people, we can shorten things. We absolutely can shorten things. We can make things a lot less devastating and not as impactful as these negative powers that be want to make them. So we can change the outcome, but they are still holding most of the cards, and they do have certain things in plan that may appear at this time that it's too far along to fully stop it. But again, if we could wake up more people quicker, we can definitely put obstacles in their way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. We just need to see and understand what's happening so we know which way that we need to move.
Absolutely. So thank you guys for your support on Patreon, because we couldn't keep doing this without the Patreon support and also the support on Ko-Fi. And also, do check out Medicinal Foods. Use coupon code EEA. It gives you a discount to support the channel. Lots of stuff there to detox. Again, we've talked about the importance of detoxing. If we're going to really make it through these times, we're going to have to prioritize our health. And that's physical, but it's also mental and spiritual as well, as we need to unplug as much as possible from all the technology and root and ground ourselves in the energies of Mother Earth, who's all beneath our feet and all around us. Do check out evolutionaryenergyarts.com and learn more about us. And you can reach us at evolutionaryenergyarts@gmail.com. Much love, God bless, and namaste.
Namaste.